My hands are the map of my life. Every callus, every scar etched into the skin, every hardened knuckle is a chapter. This long white scar on my thumb, that's 1988. A slipped beam on a construction site in West Elgin. This spray of small marks on the back of my hand is a memory of the hundreds of feet of barbed wire we strung up at Old Henderson's farm. These hands have held a hammer and a crowbar since I was 16. They've raised walls, laid roofs, and poured foundations. They were strong enough to lift an engine out of an old Chevy single-handedly, and gentle enough to change my son Alex's tiny diaper without waking him. These hands raised him after cancer took my Martha, leaving me with a 4-year-old boy and a gaping hole in my chest. These hands became his everything, his support, his protection, his source of sustenance. They earned money, cooked meals, fixed his bicycles, and wiped the tears from his cheeks. I looked at them now, sitting behind the wheel of my old Ford F-150 in the Home Depot parking lot, and I couldn't understand at what point they had transformed from a symbol of a father's care into something shameful, into the brand of a common man, one my own son didn't want to see at his fancy wedding. It all started an hour ago, in the cool, humming belly of that enormous store. I had come for some anchor bolts. My neighbor, and perhaps my only true friend, George, had asked for help strengthening an old shed in his backyard. A trivial job, a couple of hours at most. I was wandering between the tall aisles, breathing in the familiar smell of dust, wood, and some kind of chemical. In the fasteners aisle, while studying the rows of shiny screws and nuts, I heard a familiar voice. "Tom Walker." "Well, I'll be damned. Is that you?" I turned around. Bill Peterson was walking toward me, a wide grin on his face. We hadn't seen each other in 5 years, but I recognized him immediately. We'd worked together on the construction of a shopping mall in the next county back in the early 2000s. He was the same as ever, sturdy, loud, with a weather-beaten face and a habit of clapping you on the shoulder. "Bill, what brings you here?" "I thought you'd moved to Florida long ago," I managed to smile back. "Just visiting my sister." "Listen, old-timer, I was just thinking about you the other day. Saw a little piece in our local rag, the Oak Haven Chronicle. Turns out your Alex is getting married. The heir. Now that's news. Congratulations with all my heart." He shook my hand forcefully. "Your boy always had a good head on his shoulders. I remember you telling me how he got into college, some fancy one for smart kids. Looks like you working 2 jobs paid off. You must be proud, huh?" Every word he spoke was like a hammer blow to my unprotected fingers. A piece in the paper. A wedding. Alex was getting married. The world around me shrank to the hum of the air conditioners and Bill's beaming face. I felt the blood drain from my own. The box of bolts in my hand suddenly felt incredibly heavy. "Yeah, Bill, thanks," I managed to squeeze out. My voice sounded hollow and foreign. "Yeah, I'm proud, of course." "And what a bride! Emma Davenport, a beauty," he went on, relentless. "There was a whole article. Her family, they write, is a big deal. Her father, I think, is some vice president at a financial corporation in Chicago. Your boy hit the big time, caught a lucky break. Good for him. Well, see you around, Tom. It was good to see you." He gave me a friendly clap on the shoulder and, whistling, pushed his cart down the aisle. I was left standing there among the fasteners, feeling as if I'd been publicly stripped naked. The whole town knew. Old acquaintances, neighbors, readers of the local paper. Everyone but me. His father. I tossed the box of bolts back onto the shelf. I forgot about George's shed, about everything. I walked to the exit in a daze, seeing nothing around me. Outside, the sun blinded me. I got into my pickup, but didn't start the engine. I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. A single thought spun in my head. Why? I sifted through our last conversations. They were rare and short. Alex was always busy. Dad, sorry, swamped at work. Dad, Emma and I are going to her parents' for the weekend. Dad, let's catch up next week. I believed him. I understood. He had his own life, a career, a love. I didn't want to be intrusive, didn't want to seem like a lonely old man demanding attention. I waited for him to find time for me. And now I had my answer. At home, I poured myself a glass of cold water and drank it in one gulp. My hands were trembling slightly. I sat down at the old kitchen table, the very one where Alex had done his first homework assignments, and turned on the laptop. My fingers fumbled, missing the keys several times. The Oakhaven Chronicles website, the events and engagements section, and there they were, on a glossy professional photograph. Alex in a perfectly tailored dark blue suit, with a stylish haircut and a confident smile. Next to him was Emma, a slender, elegant blonde in a pearl-colored silk dress. She was pressed against him, and a huge diamond glittered on her finger. They looked like a poster for an expensive brand. The perfect couple. And below the photo, the text, Mr. and Mrs. Richard Davenport of Barrington are pleased to announce the engagement of their daughter Emma to Mr. Alex Walker, son of the late Martha Walker, and Mr. Thomas Walker of Oakhaven. A wedding is planned for August 24th at the prestigious Willow Creek Country Club. Mr. Thomas Walker. It sounded so formal, as if it were about someone else. Not the dad who read him bedtime stories and taught him how to hammer a nail. August 24th, 3 weeks away. I stared at the screen, and a wave of cold, bitter resentment rose within me. This wasn't just neglect. This was a deliberate, conscious exclusion from his life. I had to hear it from him. I found his number in my phone and pressed call. The ring seemed to last an eternity. Dad, hey. His voice was cheerful, energetic, like someone who has everything under control. How are you? Sorry I haven't called. It's been such a whirlwind these past few weeks. I'm just swamped. Hello, son. I tried to speak calmly, but my voice betrayed me with a tremor. I'm fine. I have some news. I think I'm getting married. A stunned silence fell on the other end of the line. What? He finally said. What do you mean? I mean, I found out from Bill Peterson at Home Depot. And from the town newspaper. Congratulations, Alex. I'm happy for you. The pause stretched on. I could hear his ragged breathing. He was caught. Dad. Damn it. I was just about to call you and explain everything. He began to stammer. And I heard not shame in his voice, but annoyance. Annoyance that his elegant plan had gone awry. Explain? What is there to explain, Alex? You're getting married. That's wonderful news. I just would have liked to hear it from you, not from the papers. Listen, Dad, it's not that simple. We didn't want to make a big show of it. It's going to be a very private, intimate event. He was clearly choosing his words, trying to soften the blow. I'm your father, Alex. I'm not a show. I'm family. Or am I missing something? And then he said it. The words that burned a hole in my heart like acid. Dad, please, don't be offended. Here's the thing. Emma. Well, and her family. They're from a completely different world, you understand? They have their own rules, their own circle. Very influential people. And, well, Emma thinks you'd feel awkward, that you're too simple, that you wouldn't fit in. We don't want to put you in an uncomfortable position. Too simple. I, who had stayed up all night when he had a fever. I, who had worked in blizzards and pouring rain so he could have the best food and clothes. I, whose simple, calloused hands had paid for his not-so-simple college education that had led him to this different world. "I see," was all I could manage to say. The lump in my throat made it hard to breathe. "Dad, I knew you'd understand. You're the best." Such a genuine, childish relief came through in his voice that it made me sick. He was glad to be rid of me so easily. "We'll definitely stop by after the honeymoon. We'll bring cake, show you all the pictures. You'll see everything." He kept talking about their plans, about their future house, but I wasn't listening anymore. I silently pressed the end call button. I sat at the kitchen table in the ensuing silence. The house I had once built as a fortress for my family now felt like the prison of my loneliness. And I realized this wasn't just hurt. It was an earthquake that had destroyed the very foundation of my life, a foundation on which a single word had been carved: Father. The night was long and silent. Sleep wouldn't come. I got out of bed and wandered through the dark house, which suddenly felt alien and hollow. Every object here was a witness to my life, my sacrifices. There was the old rocking chair by the fireplace. In it, I, a young widower, had rocked a feverish Alex in my arms, singing him the old cowboy songs my father had sung to me. There were the pencil marks on the doorframe where we measured his height every year, from a small tick at my knees level to the last one, almost as tall as me, made before he left for college. I walked over to the bookshelf, in the bottom drawer of which I kept important documents. I hadn't looked in there for years. With trembling hands, I took out a thick, worn folder labeled Alex. I opened it, and the past wafted out. This wasn't just a folder of papers. This was the detailed financial statement of my fatherly love. The first thing I pulled out was a lien agreement. A lien on this very house. When Alex announced he didn't want to go to the state university, but to a private college on the East Coast, I almost fell over. The tuition for 4 years was equal to the price of 2 houses like mine. "Dad, you don't get it," he had told me then, gesturing passionately, his eyes burning with a dream. "It's not just about the knowledge. It's about the connections. The children of senators and businessmen go there. It's my only chance to break out of this hole, to achieve something in life." I didn't have that kind of money, so I went to the bank. I remember the face of the loan officer, Mr. Adams. He looked at me, at my working hands, at my simple clothes, and his eyes held a mixture of pity and bewilderment. "Mr. Walker, are you sure? This is a very big risk. If you can't make the payments, the bank will take your house." "My son deserves the best," I had replied then, and I signed the papers. For the next 4 years, I lived in a state of total austerity. I took any job I could find. Roofing on weekends, fixing plumbing in the evenings, clearing snow from the driveways of the rich in the fancy part of town during winter. I forgot what a vacation was. I ate the cheapest canned food and wore my work clothes until they turned to rags. Every penny went to paying the college bills. I only saw Alex during the holidays. He would come home, thinner, more mature, in fashionable clothes, and with each visit, he spoke more and more in his own new language, using words like startup, networking, and investment portfolio. He spoke with enthusiasm about his new friends, whose fathers owned yachts and flew private jets. I listened, nodded, and was happy for him. I thought I was doing everything right. For his graduation, I drove halfway across the country in my old pickup. Gas was expensive, and I slept in the truck at rest stops to save on a motel. I arrived just as the ceremony was beginning. I stood in a crowd of well-dressed parents who smelled of expensive perfume and felt like a crow in a flock of peacocks. My only suit, bought 10 years ago for a cousin's wedding, hung loosely on me. When Alex, beaming in his cap and gown, received his diploma, I clapped the loudest, I cried, and I wasn't ashamed. And then he gave a speech on behalf of the graduates. He thanked the professors for their wisdom, his friends for their support, and his parents for believing in them. A generic, impersonal thank you. Not a word about the mortgaged house, not a word about my sleepless nights. When I approached him afterward, he hugged me quickly, patting me on the back. "Dad, meet Chad's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Vanderbilt." They gave me a fleeting, polite smile and immediately returned to discussing their summer plans in Europe. I felt like an awkward appendage to their brilliant world. That evening, Alex went to celebrate with his friends at an expensive restaurant. "Dad, don't be offended. It'll just be the young crowd. You'd be bored." I wasn't offended. I gave him the last of the cash I had and I drove back, a long road home, in an empty truck. Flipping through the papers, I found more and more evidence. Checks for the rent on his first apartment in Chicago. I paid it for 6 months while he searched for his dream job. And when he found it, I came to help him move. The apartment was a wreck, and I, instead of resting, took an unpaid vacation and spent 2 weeks renovating it. I plastered the walls, laid down laminate flooring, and replaced pipes that hadn't been changed since the Nixon administration. Alex would come home late in the evening, tired, toss his jacket on a chair and say, "Dad, you're a magician. I don't know what I'd do without you." Those words were my greatest reward. I didn't notice that he never once picked up a brush or a hammer. He was making important connections over dinner with colleagues. When I was finished, the apartment sparkled. He handed me a crumpled $100 bill. "Here, Dad, this is for gas." I refused. From then on, it seems, he decided my labor was worthless. Then came Emma. Their first visit to my house was a cold shower. She entered my home as if a health inspector were entering a roadside diner. She surveyed my simple furniture, the napkins Martha had embroidered, the old photos on the walls. I offered them coffee. "Oh, thank you, but I only drink decaf lattes with almond milk." "Do you have any?" she asked. Alex blushed. My dad has a normal house, not a coffee shop." The whole evening, she sat with a polite but icy smile, while Alex chattered nonstop, trying to fill the awkward silences. I could see how ashamed he was. Ashamed of me, of my house, of my entire life. After that, the visits became rare, and the requests became frequent. Help with the down payment on their first townhouse. "Dad, it's a great investment. Money to buy a new car for Emma. Her old BMW is falling apart. It's not safe." Paying off their credit card bills when they miscalculated a little on their vacation in Italy. Each time, it was an utmost necessity. Each time I gave away the savings I had been putting aside for my old age. I was their insurance policy. Their emergency fund? I was a function. I closed the folder. The dawn was already breaking in the east. I sat in my old armchair and felt empty. I was trembling from a cold, clear realization. I wasn't just giving him money. I was buying his love. I was paying for the right to be called his father. And now, when he had the opportunity to make a better deal, to get rich and respectable in-laws, along with a beautiful wife, my contract had been terminated. I had become an unprofitable asset. Too simple for their new world. I had promised Martha I would make him happy, and I had kept my word. He was happy. But I had forgotten to ask her at what cost. Now I knew the answer. At the cost of my self-respect. After that sleepless night, the pain didn't go away. It settled inside me, like an uninvited guest who had no intention of leaving. During the day, it turned into a dull, aching weight in my chest, and at night it sharpened, forcing me to replay that humiliating conversation over and over in my mind. I tried to work to distract myself. I fixed a neighbor's fence, changed the oil in my pickup. But my hands moved mechanically, my thoughts elsewhere. I tried to find excuses for Alex. I tried to convince myself that he wasn't malicious, just weak. That he had fallen under the influence of this girl, Emma, and her powerful family. That he was afraid to disappoint them, and was therefore sacrificing me. But somewhere deep down, I knew it was self-deception. Weakness doesn't justify cruelty. All my pathetic hopes were finally crushed a few days later. It was a Tuesday. Breaking my usual rule not to pry into other people's lives, I once again visited Alex's social media page. There was some masochistic need to see something that would cause me even more pain. And I found it. A new post. An entire album of photos with the caption, "An unforgettable evening with true family. Thank you, Richard and Carol Davenport, for a fabulous pre-wedding dinner." The photos showed a chic restaurant with panoramic windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. Alex and Emma were in the center, surrounded by her relatives. Everyone was laughing, raising glasses of champagne. Emma's father, Richard, a well-groomed man with silver hair and an expensive suit, had his arm around Alex's shoulders. They were looking at each other, as if they had just closed a profitable deal. But that's not what finished me. What finished me was the caption under that specific photo, written by Emma herself and liked by Alex. She had written, "Finally, my future husband has a father he can be truly proud of. Welcome to the family, Alex. A father he can be truly proud of." I stared at the phrase. The air was trapped in my lungs. This was no longer just neglect. It was a public renunciation. They hadn't just cut me out of the wedding. They had cut me out of his entire life, his past, as if I had never existed. As if the construction worker who had broken his back on job sites to pay for his education was just a temporary, inconvenient guardian who could now be discarded as useless because a more prestigious model of a father had been found. I slammed the laptop shut with such force that it cracked. There was a ringing in my ears. I stood up and, staggering, walked to the window. A fine, gray rain was drizzling outside. Across the street, under the awning of his workshop, George was tinkering with some old engine, in his trademark cap and greasy overalls. He looked up, saw me in the window, and waved. I waved back automatically. George. He was my complete opposite. Loud, loved to joke, simple as a $3 bill. His children had also long since moved across the country, and rarely visited, but he never got discouraged. "Old man, they've got their own lives. The main thing is that they're doing all right," he'd say. But he was always there. When I had an appendicitis attack 3 years ago, it was George who drove me to the hospital in the middle of the night. When I was fixing my roof and nearly fell, it was he who held the ladder. We didn't talk about feelings. We just drank beer in the evenings and sat in silence, and that silence was more eloquent than any words. He respected my hands. He respected my work. He respected me. And at that moment, as I was thinking about this, my phone, lying on the table, rang. The name I least wanted to see right now lit up the screen. Alex. For a split second, my foolish father's heart fluttered. Maybe he saw that awful post, felt ashamed, and was calling to apologize. I gathered my courage and answered, "Dad, hey, am I interrupting?" His voice was nauseatingly cheerful and businesslike. No hint of remorse. "I'm listening, Alex," I answered coldly. Dad, listen. I have a small but very important favor to ask. Emma and I are finalizing our honeymoon. We're going to Bora Bora, just like we dreamed. But it turns out, the overwater bungalow we really wanted costs a bit more than we planned. The difference is literally $3,000. I was thinking, maybe you could help us out. Consider it your wedding present to us. We would be incredibly grateful. I was silent. I just couldn't believe the boundlessness of his cynicism. He didn't invite me to the wedding because I embarrassed him. He let his fiancée publicly humiliate me. And now he was asking me for money. My simple money, earned with my own sweat and blood, for his luxury trip. At that moment, something inside me snapped with a loud crack. The last thread of forgiveness I had been clinging to disintegrated. The pain and resentment were replaced by a cold, ringing rage. This was not hysteria. This was the rage of tempered steel. No, I said, a single word, quietly and clearly. A bewildered silence fell on the other end. What? No? Dad, I didn't hear you. I said no, Alex. I'm not giving you a single cent. But why? His voice had the tone of a spoiled child who had been denied a toy. What's the problem? It's not a huge amount of money for you. You've always helped me. Yes, I've always helped you. My voice was as hard as granite. I helped you when you were my son. But judging by the latest news, you have a new father now, one you can be proud of. I imagine $3,000 is just pocket change for a vice president of a financial corporation. Ask him. Dad, don't start. That's completely different. What does that have to do with anything? He began to get irritated. It has to do with the fact, Alex, that you apparently think I'm not good enough to sit at the same table as your new family, but my money is good enough to pay for your whims. Well, I don't agree. My money stays with me, as does my self-respect. You just don't understand. You're ruining everything. You're selfish, he screamed. No, son. A selfish person is someone who takes without giving anything in return. Someone who is ashamed of his past and his roots. I'm done with this conversation, Alex, and I don't think we should have any more in the future. Good luck with your new family. I hung up without waiting for his reply. I stood in the middle of the room, and my heart was beating strong and steady. The fog in my head had cleared. I was no longer a victim. I was no longer a soft, forgiving old man. I was a man who had had almost everything taken from him, but was left with the most important thing, his dignity. And I was going to fight for it. The decision wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't born in the heat of anger. It matured within me, like a fine piece of timber, over the next 24 hours. The rage passed, leaving behind a resolve as cold as ice. I didn't want revenge. Revenge is loud, dirty, and demeaning to the one seeking it. I wanted justice. Quiet, final, and inescapable. My action was not to be one of destruction, but of creation. The creation of a new order in my own life. I decided to rewrite my will. The thought was simple and clear. It brought me such relief, as if I had thrown a bag of rocks off my shoulders that I had been carrying for years. My house, built with my own hands on this land, my old pickup truck, which had served me faithfully for almost 20 years. My savings, every penny of which was earned through honest hard work. All of this was my legacy, my last word in this life. And I realized that this word should not go to the one who had betrayed me. The next day, I went to see George first thing in the morning. He was busy in his garage, which was both his workshop and his sanctuary. It smelled of gasoline, metal, and coffee. George, I need your advice, I said, sitting on an old toolbox. He wiped his hands on a rag and looked at me with his attentive eyes. If it's about women, you've come to the wrong place. My Margie was the only one I ever understood, and even then, only half the time. Anything else, shoot. It's about fathers and sons, I said, and to my own surprise, I told him everything. About the wedding, the conversation with Alex, the post online, and the call asking for money. I spoke for a long time, without emotion, just stating the facts. George listened in silence, not interrupting, just nodding from time to time. When I finished, he was silent for a long time. Then he went to his workbench, poured coffee from an old thermos into 2 chipped mugs, and handed one to me. "You know, Tom," he said, taking a sip, "I have an old oak tree in my backyard. A strong, good oak. And ivy started growing at its roots. At first, it was beautiful, green, but then it started to choke the tree. It wrapped around the whole trunk. Its leaves blocked the sun from the oak, and the oak began to wither. For a long time, I felt sorry for that ivy, thought it was alive too. And then I realized, if I don't cut it down, it will kill my oak. So I cut it down, right at the root. And you know what? The oak came back to life. A year later, it grew new, strong branches. He looked me straight in the eye. "Your son is your ivy, Tom. You grew him, you watered him, and he started to choke you. Sometimes, to save the tree, you have to cut down the ivy." His simple metaphor hit the mark perfectly. It gave me what I was missing, confidence in my own righteousness. That same day, I called Mr. E. Henderson, our family lawyer. The old man had handled my father's affairs. His office was in an old building downtown and looked as if time had stopped there about 50 years ago. It smelled of dusty books and furniture polish. "Thomas," he said, adjusting his gold-rimmed glasses. "Good to see you. What brings you in?" "I want to change my will, Mr. Henderson," I said firmly. He nodded without surprise and took my folder from the safe. "I'm listening, Thomas." "I want to nullify the old will, completely, and draw up a new one." He looked up at me. "Are you sure?" "This is a serious step. Alex is your only heir." "I don't see it that way anymore. I want to bequeath everything I own, the house, the land, the car, all my bank accounts, down to the last cent, to my friend and neighbor, George Francis Miller." The lawyer put down his pen. He studied me for a few seconds. "You're leaving Alex with nothing." "I am leaving him something. I brought it with me." I placed an old shoebox on his desk. He looked at it with bewilderment. In this box is his real inheritance, his past. In it are his mother's letters that she wrote to me from the hospital. In it are his first baby shoes and a few childhood photos. And on top, a check for $1. I want this to be officially recorded, the box and $1. I could see that Mr. Henderson understood everything. He was an old, wise man and had seen his share of family dramas in his life. "And one more thing," I added. "I want to attach a short note to the will. It should be delivered to Alex along with this box on his wedding day." "Dictate, Thomas," he said, picking up his pen again. And I dictated. Slowly, clearly, weighing every word. "To Alex, congratulations on your wedding day. As a gift, I am returning to you that which you so easily discarded, your past. In this box is your mother's love and my once boundless patience. This is the foundation upon which you were built. Everything else, the house, the money, the property, everything created by my 2 simple hands, I leave to a man who always respected those hands and never found them shameful. Start your new life with this $1. Your former father, Thomas Walker. When I finished, there was silence in the office. Mr. Henderson looked at me over his glasses, and in his eyes I saw not judgment, but deep respect. It will be done, Thomas. Exactly as you've said. I walked out of his office onto the sunlit street, and for the first time in many weeks, I felt not pain, but freedom. I wasn't just disinheriting my son. I was taking back my own life. The day of Alex's wedding, August 24th, turned out to be remarkably fair. The sky was clear and piercingly blue. I woke at dawn to the sound of birds, not to the heaviness in my chest. For the first time in a long time, I felt calm. I wasn't going to make a scene. I didn't drive to that pretentious country club to spoil their celebration. That would be petty and undignified. Instead, I did what I had done my whole life. I went to work. I had promised George I would fix his old shed, and I kept my word. I got out my tools, put on my work overalls, and got down to business. I replaced rotten boards, reinforced the supports, and drove in new nails. The rhythmic, familiar movements were calming. Every hammer blow was like a period at the end of a long, painful sentence. Thump. The pain goes away. Thump. The resentment fades. Thump. I'm taking back control. Around noon, when the sun was at its zenith, I took a break. I called a courier service I had found online. Half an hour later, a young man in a van pulled up. I handed him a heavy, officially sealed package from Mr. Henderson. Inside was the new will, the cover letter, and that same shoebox. The address is the Willow Creek Country Club. The recipient is Alex Walker. Deliver it personally into the groom's hands. Tell him it's an urgent wedding gift from his father, I instructed. The young man nodded and drove off. I watched him go until the van disappeared around the corner. The final nail had been driven. By evening, I had finished the job. George's shed stood like new, strong, and sturdy. George, coming home from work, walked around it for a long time, clucking his tongue in admiration. Tom, you're not a man. You're a machine. I would have been fiddling with this for a week. How much do I owe you for materials and labor? Nothing, I answered. Considerate payment for the use of your ears and for the wise advice about the ivy. He chuckled and clapped me on the shoulder. Then the beer's on me. Lots of beer. That evening, we sat on my porch, the very one I had built 30 years ago for Martha and me. On the old wooden table were 2 sweating bottles of beer and a plate of salty pretzels. We didn't talk about the wedding. We talked about fishing, about old cars, about how the grass used to be greener. George told his endless jokes, and I laughed. I laughed easily and freely, without a stone in my heart. Dusk fell. The streetlights came on. The air smelled of cut grass and barbecue from the neighboring yards. It was a perfect summer evening, and for the first time in many years, I felt not just needed, but in my place. I was home. Around 10 o'clock, my phone, lying on the table, vibrated furiously. The name Alex lit up the screen. I looked at George. He gave an understanding nod. I calmly picked up the phone and put it on speaker. Father, are you out of your mind? What the hell is this? His voice was distorted with rage and panic. In the background, I could hear loud music, the drunken shouts of guests, and the distinct sound of a woman crying. I was sure it was Emma. I'm listening, Alex, I said calmly. This box, this letter, the will. You left everything to that old drunk, your neighbor, and you left me $1. Did you decide to destroy me? I didn't destroy anything, Alex. I just disposed of my property as I saw fit. It's my legal right. Right. You've humiliated me in front of Emma's family, Her father is looking at me like I'm some kind of con man. You've ruined the most important day of my life. Have I? I took a sip of beer. I thought ruining the most important day of someone's life was telling them they were too simple to attend. I guess I was wrong. Money is more important after all. But I'm your son, your only son, he yelled, and there was desperation in his voice. The old trump card no longer worked. Yes, you are my son, and I have fulfilled my duty to you. I gave you everything I could, and more. I paid for your ticket into the world you so desperately wanted to live in. And now you're there. You have a wife, a beautiful new family, and a father to be proud of. My role in your life is over, and my inheritance, earned with my own hands, will go to the man who always respected those hands. A heavy, ringing silence fell on the other end of the line. All that could be heard was his ragged breathing. Live your life, Alex, I said finally, and build it yourself, from scratch. It's a very sobering experience. Goodbye. I ended the call and placed the phone face down on the table. George looked at me in silence. Then he raised his beer bottle. To the Oaks, Tom, he said quietly. I raised mine. To the Oaks, George, and to them, never having ivy grow on them again. We clinked our bottles. The sound of glass against glass echoed in the evening quiet like a final chord. I leaned back in my chair and looked up at the stars. For the first time in many years, I felt not bitterness, but peace, a deep, deserved peace of a man who had finally taken back his own home.